Hello beautiful people, this video is about who is responsible for technical debt. So this is a really important question because it is part of the root of a lot of the problems when it comes to technical debt. So the short answer is everybody, but the real answer is a very particular person who we're going to talk about in this video. Hello, I'm Jennifer Kenny. I'm the best-selling author of The Innovation Mindset and the award-winning author of the book 100% Capacity. I work with Fortune 500 companies in robotics, AI and machine learning. And on this channel, I help professionals and leaders in tech cut through complexity, build capacity, and deliver real impact. So let's talk about 5 things that I want you to pay attention to when you start thinking about who's responsible for technical debt. Developers will identify technical debt because they know, based on the code they've developed and what they're putting in for testing, whether or not they've taken shortcuts. So they get to see it first, and sometimes the testers will see it even when the developers haven't seen it. But here's the important thing about it is, if they don't have standards for what gets classified as technical debt, then they're not going to be aware of it enough to be able to see it. They'll take shortcuts or fast routes, or they'll find new ways of doing things. It could be very valuable new ways of doing things, and they may classify them as technical debt because they are not the norm or the standard. But that only happens if the norm or the standard exists. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But when developers identify technical debt, it's not enough that they've just flagged it and identified it. It now needs to get translated into a log where we have an understanding of why the decision was made, who made the decision, who was the developer who did the call that this was debt, and who was the customer who's saying, I'm allowing that to go forward as debt. So in the absence of having a clear internal customer and a clear internal performer for the call on what is debt and for entering that into the debt logs, then what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for just an unwieldy batch of a whole bunch of things that needs to get done by somebody without any of the context or understanding as to how the decision was made in the first place. If you don't have that, it becomes almost twice as difficult to actually be able to overcome it and draw down and pull down that debt. Development leads and product managers weigh trade-offs. That's part of what they do on an ongoing basis. It's a really important part of getting a product out the door. It's part of just the pragmatism and the practicality of delivering something. Now, the problem with that is, in the absence of recognizing who was responsible for doing that development work in the first place and having clear understanding of customer and performer internally within the project for a particular piece of work, what happens is you end up with broken promises. So for example, if somebody is looking to do a particular piece of development and they have identified that that really doesn't need to be done for that release, that person who is the developer has an internal customer for that work. If we're not tracking that effectively, that customer is still looking for that work to be done. It might show up in your Jira logs. It might show up in however it is you manage your development tasks. If those tasks remain anonymous without internal customers, you're going to end up flagging that as debt in your system, and you're going to miss the opportunity to be able to go, I'm closing the loop on that. That customer is satisfied. We can now take that out of our logs and we can recognize that that is complete rather than it just gets classified as debt. So when you're doing the trade-offs, remember that if you are running your development processes effectively, decisions like that need to involve both a customer and a performer. And they can be done fast, but they need to be done, and they also then need to be reflected in your work logs. It falls to the engineering managers to really structure the repayment of the debt. And a lot of times the engineering managers are not necessarily the ones who are very deeply involved in the planning for the quarter. So there's got to be a lot more conversation and design work that gets done between the people who are doing the leadership and the architecture of the work and the people who are doing the engineering of the work. Many times, because we miss out on that, we're pressuring the engineering managers to be able to pick up and clean up a lot of technical debt. We haven't accounted for it and taken care of that in the design and planning for the month or for the quarter or for the next sprint. One of the things I talked about in my other video on technical debt here is to really look at it as how we make this a conversation that is part of the norm of running an effective team, and is something that we can use strategically and is something that we design and plan for. Many groups, because they're moving so fast, they tend to treat tech debt like something that they kind of throw in the corner and ignore and hope it's going to go away. If you're strategic and smart about it, you can actually manage it in a way that it supports and drives innovation. You can be strategic about it in terms of your ability to be able to make your deadlines and your demos and your releases. And if you're not, it's always going to be the thing in the corner that's going to be on your back and driving you crazy and eroding the culture of success and the realization of success and value in the team. The fifth thing that I want to talk about is that what I refer to as everyone owns the loop. Everyone owns their own commitment. As you start thinking about every phase of how technical debt happens and gets accrued and gets reduced, is important thing to think about is the loop. And I talk about that in a number of other videos where it's develop, design, deliver, and declare. And that loop involves conversations between customers and performers together. Internal customers, internal performers, but people who know that that's the conversation that they're having. Those decisions, when they are made from the perspective of standards and value and strategy and decision making and innovation, are much, much more powerful conversations than ones where we're simply throwing it in the corner and hoping it'll go away. So as you start thinking about technical debt and who's really responsible for it, recognize that everybody's responsible for it in terms of managing it and maintaining it, but there is one person on the team who's actually responsible for making sure that it is managed strategically and dealt with accordingly. So just to recap, there are 5 things that we need to look at. Developers identify it. Product managers decide on the trade-offs. Engineering managers structure the repayment and need to be supported very well by the product managers. Leaders set the culture of having conversations and knowing it and understanding it and managing it. And everybody at every level of the organization owns the loop of the commitment around whether or not they're having those right conversations, effective conversations with their internal customers. In my next video, what is the best way to manage project success and failure? I talk about how to be able to think of project success and how that changes how you think of technical debt. That's a video worth watching if you're concerned about this and you're working to be able to reduce it and manage it effectively yourself. So in closing, just recognize that technical debt is everybody's problem. You need to have one person on your team who holds that like an ongoing concern and manages it and reports back on it. But in the end of the day, it accumulates based on our ability to actually be able to have internal customers, have conversations with them, and manage those commitments that we make with them accordingly. Take care. As you manage this, I wish you the best of luck.